1 Kings 12 to 14. Well, after a 40-year reign, Solomon has died, and there is a new king on the throne, his son Rehoboam. Of course, Solomon has broken the one rule that God gave him, to not walk after other gods. 1 Kings 11, verse 10. Don't follow or don't walk after, don't pattern your life after other gods. And of course, he broke that one rule. Well, that sin will have ripple effects, aftershock effects, all through the rest of the story. So let's see what happens. The new king, Rehoboam, of course, would be reigning in Jerusalem. But he comes up to Shechem. Shechem is the main city between the tribes of Ephraim and Manasseh, a large city, and it says that the tribal leaders of the northern tribes, which were stronger really than Judah ever really was, these tribal leaders who really do want to follow the new king, they're led by a man named Jeroboam, who had worked for King Solomon. They all come to Rehoboam and say, "Can you please ease up on the forced labor that Israel has been used to under King Solomon?" Rehoboam makes a foolish decision and says, "No, I'm going to make it harder on you guys." And so we have this rebellion that breaks out. In fact, here it is. "Now when all Israel saw that the king did not listen to them, the people answered the king, saying, What have we to do, or what share have we in David?" Remember, that in David idea means to follow a king, to be in a king. "We have no inheritance in the son of Jesse. To your tents, O Israel. Now see to your own house, O David." So Israel departed to their tents. And so Rehoboam goes back down to Jerusalem and begins to reign from there. Jeroboam becomes the new leader, or the new king, and he will reign in Shechem. And we have the famous division of the tribes of Israel, and really that division has been felt a long ways back, all the way, I'd say, to Genesis 49, when Israel, or Isaac, blessed Judah to be the leader of the nation. And there just seems to be a lot of tension all the way through the history of Israel. So, in fact, it even says in our text that that the rebellion between the 10 tribes to the north and the 2 tribes to the south is still in effect, quote, to this day, which just means that at the time of the writing of Chronicles, it was still hard and heavy, this antagonism between these tribes. The northern tribes will be called Israel. They'll also be called Samaria in the Bible. That's the third capital after Shechem and Tirzah are the capitals. It's also called Ephraim in some of the prophetic literature. That's the major tribe, the most dominant tribe of the 10 up here. These 10 tribes, Israel, will have a kingdom for 209 years. 4 dynasties of families, meaning it's an unstable kingdom because we have succession problems at times, and 19 kings in all will reign. It's going to be a prosperous land because, remember, this area right here is really where the bread and shall we call it the breadbasket of Israel is, and so it will be the more prosperous of the 2 kingdoms. But it will be the more idolatrous of the 2, and we'll get to that. Down here, of course, this kingdom will be called Judah, named after its main tribe. It does seem to include Benjamin and Simeon, so really 3 tribes are considered part of this. It will last for 344 years, a little longer, well, quite a bit longer. It will also be idolatrous. But let's talk about that and that story. What happens is Jeroboam, realizing that if he allows his people to go down to Jerusalem and to continue to worship Yahweh, that would be a threat to his kingdom. So here's what he does. "Therefore the king made 2 calves of gold and said to the people, Here are your gods, O Israel, which brought you up from the land of Egypt." That's almost a direct quote of Aaron when he made the golden calf in Exodus 32. And he set up one in Bethel. Bethel is a city just north of the boundary between Israel and Judah. And the other he set up in Dan. Now, Dan is well north of the Sea of Galilee, but it's the northern edge of the land and the southern edge, Dan and Bethel. He made shrines on the high places and made priests from every class of people who were not of the sons of Levi. So Jeroboam appointed new priests, new sacrifices, new altars, new feasts, a new calendar, in fact, for the worship of Israel here to the north. So he sets up a completely idolatrous system of worship for his own people. Now, what's also going on, and this is always good to know, this is in 2 Chronicles 11:16. Those from all the tribes of Israel, such as set their heart to seek the Lord God of Israel, came to Jerusalem to sacrifice to the Lord God of their fathers. And this will happen for about 3 years. Interesting little point that people will sneak down and worship at Jerusalem for a while. The point is that there always will be, and it's good to remember here, and as we go through again the story of Israel as it unfolds, that although there's a corporate problem of idolatry, there will always be those people, they're called the remnant later in the story, always be those people who are inwardly righteous because they still follow Yahweh. They will be few and far between at some points of the story, but it's interesting that the story even here mentions this. Well, what happens then by the time we get going, in fact, it's even in our text today, we have this phrase used, the sin of Jeroboam, or sometimes the way or the ways of Jeroboam. That phrase will be repeated 23 times in the story as we go from here. It gives meaning, I believe, to what Joseph heard from the angel in Matthew 1, verse 21, when it says that Mary would bring forth a son, and you shall call his name Jesus, for he will save his people from their sins. That's the sins of Jeroboam.